Welcome, everybody. My title today is a bit of a mouthful, but I think it will be a ton of help to each and every one of you. I want to talk today about 4 simple strategies for supporting your own mental health as a leader and the mental health of your team. And of course, I want to take a moment to thank Tim and the team at Leading Influence for your invitation. I'm really grateful. And I want to thank all of you for your service, for showing up, for leading, and for being willing to listen today. Now, as we begin to slowly emerge from the global pandemic, most practitioners in the field of mental health agree that along with the pandemic of COVID-19, which is primarily physical, there's also a pandemic around mental health. It's possible that this pandemic of mental health might prove to be even more devastating than COVID-19 in the end. This mental health pandemic has created enormous challenges at a personal, professional, relational, and even societal level. But it's also created incredible opportunity for resilience and for flourishing. I know this because I've looked at the overwhelming data that point in that direction and because I've been on the front lines of this from the very start. Now, my introduction to the mental health pandemic happened around March 15th, 2020. I happen to live in Alberta, and like most of the country, the Alberta government instituted a total shutdown to flatten the curve. Our team at Flourishing Workplace focuses on workplace mental health, and I had been asked to give a talk to an association of local entrepreneurs in a community called Okotoks. It was virtual, but as I began speaking on leader mental health and supporting team mental health, and then when I opened it up for discussion, I was shocked that in this professional meeting with over 24 attendees online, there was a vulnerability and brokenness like I had never seen around stress, anxiety, fear, and worry. People wept openly as they shared what they were experiencing. From the start, I could see how real this pandemic of mental health was. Now, a short time after that, I was asked to give a talk to an association of HR professionals. Of the thousands of keynotes that I've given in my career, this was by far my toughest yet. One of the co-chairs of the association had recently lost his life due to suicide. And my role was to speak to the group about grieving and leader mental health. This was the speaking opportunity you never want to get, especially when I learned that due to the challenges of the lockdown, which had devastated his business and his cash flow, he had to lay off his entire team. He could not maintain his personal or business financial obligations. His despair led to the ending of his life due to suicide. And tragically, he left behind his wife and his children. Now, that is tragic. But on the other hand, despite the pandemic and the enormous challenges faced by leaders, there were also shining examples of unbelievable resilience and flourishing. I think about one of my clients at Flourishing Workplace, an organization led by 2 immigrant brothers where they incorporated the simple strategies that we teach for supporting their own mental health and that of their team, and how they actually grew in staff numbers and in physical locations and in revenue in a bricks and mortar business. They run restaurants and food service in the middle of the pandemic. Their commitment to implementing the simple strategies that we teach for supporting their own mental health and that of their team was amazing. Investing in their own mental health and that of their team was a cost to them in the middle of the pandemic. And yet they saw this investment and they made it and they saw incredible returns. Now, even before COVID-19, leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives were especially at risk when it came to mental health. In June of 2019, so just before the pandemic, the Canadian Mental Health Association, supported by the Business Development Bank of Canada, released an in-depth report examining Canadian entrepreneur mental health. The study revealed the following, that 62% of business owners feel depressed at least once a week. 46% say that mental health issues interfere with their ability to work. 67% were stressed about their business's cash flow. 51% reported feeling inadequate, and 50% reported depression. 66% of entrepreneurs face difficulty in maintaining a work-life balance due to stress. And of course, all of these feelings were felt by female entrepreneurs and leaders, but at an even higher rate with greater frequency. Now, I'll tell you what, that tells me that we were experiencing a crisis of mental health among leaders and entrepreneurs even before COVID-19 happened. And in March 2019, the World Economic Forum also talked about a mental health crisis raging among leaders and executives. They discovered that leaders are twice as likely as the general public to suffer from depression, 6 times more likely to suffer from ADHD, 3 times more likely to suffer from substance abuse, and 10 times more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder. Not only that, but they were twice as likely to have a psychiatric hospitalization and twice as likely to have suicidal thoughts. Now, all of these statistics were referring to owners, businesses, entrepreneurs, but also leaders and executives, people in prominent leadership roles. And all of these stats were pre-COVID 2019. You don't need to be a psychiatrist to imagine that those numbers are likely worse as a result of the pandemic. And in my view, addressing this ongoing mental health catastrophe for leaders, it's a moral imperative. Mental health is as essential for knowledge work in the 21st century as physical health was important for physical labor in the Industrial Revolution. I'll tell you what, now the tools of our craft are creativity, ingenuity, insight, innovation, and critical thinking. I mean, these are the cognitive cornerstones that create value and that allow you as a leader to operate at your best. And yet depression, anxiety, and mood disorders are all working to undermine leader performance. They contribute to burnout. They contribute to conflict. They contribute to toxic cultures. They contribute to high turnover. They contribute to an inability to hire top talent, contribute to an inability to show up for meetings, and poor decision-making in general. Here in our province of Alberta, we saw a situation in the middle of the pandemic where one of the ministers of government, essentially came forward and talked about how alcohol had completely taken over his life. And so when you are in a position of responsibility, when you are in a position of authority, when you're in a position of leadership, not only do you wrestle with the same challenges that everyone else wrestles with, but you also have that added weight and that added burden. And I think that's a part of why we see worse mental health outcomes among leaders than the average public. The reality is that leaders are trying to ignore their own needs for well-being. The ethos they've internalized is this idea of no pain, no gain. And it's a sad message that they have experienced that success is purely measured in quantitative returns, ROI, profit, all of those things. There's 10 reasons I think leaders are at risk when it comes to mental health. I'm just going to give them to you as a list because they don't take a lot of explanation. But these 10 reasons leaders are at risk when it comes to mental health, I'll tell you what, I'm sure that they speak to some of you here right now. Number 1, higher expectations. Number 2, longer work hours. Number 3, larger workload. Number 4, consistent image management. Number 5, a blending of personal and role identity. Number 6, greater stress. Number 7, deeper uncertainty. Number 8, increased social isolation. Number 9, larger risks overall. And I think number 10, either less access to health benefit plans or just less time to use them. See, the challenge for leaders is, how do I manage my own mental health? And yet, how do I support the mental health of my team? So that's my question. How do we do that? Well, I think you can do it with 4 simple strategies that I'm going to share with you right now. Mental health and flourishing is not a trait that people are born with, like some kind of genetic bonus. I'll tell you what, it's like a muscle. It's more something that we can develop in our own lives. Each and every one of us can create positive mental health and flourishing when we learn these 4 simple strategies. I'm going to go ahead and give them to you right now. Strategy number 1 is self-care. Now, self-care is this idea of loving yourself. And I know we hear a lot about self-care and we think about, we hear the term self-care and we think bubble baths and candles and a glass of wine. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But I'll tell you what, it's far better to invest in yourself through the vehicle of self-care. When Warren Buffett, the investment king, was asked, what's the best investment you ever made? He said, the very best investment you can make is an investment in yourself. Now, in ancient tradition, whether you're a person of faith or not, it's amazing, this story to me, because in ancient tradition, there's this idea that the Creator worked for 6 days and then rested on the 7th. So even the Creator, the one who made everything that we can see, everything that we can taste, touch, smell, see, and hear, that same Creator worked 6 days and rested on the seventh. Now, Ovid was a Roman poet who lived during the reign of Caesar Augustus, and he said this, "Take rest. A field that has rested gives a bountiful crop." For millennia, farmers have known that every so often they need to let their field rest. Okay? Why is that? Because land that rests purposely, left unseeded for one or more growing seasons, allows the soil to regenerate and the minerals and the elements needed to regenerate to grow productive crops. Now, metaphorically speaking, your field and mine, it's our body, it's our mind, it's our spirit. It's no secret that how well they work depends on how well rested they are. We need appropriate timeouts if we want to live a vibrant and a productive life. I wonder, are you thinking about rest and self-care? Now, I know for many of you, it's almost impossible to think about sleep, nutrition, and exercise because your schedules are so crazy and often, I would imagine, so out of control. And so I want to have empathy here today, and I don't want to give you a list of things to do, but as much as you can, wherever you can, in as much as you possibly can make this happen, adding more sleep, adding more nutrition, adding more exercise to your daily routine. These things will have a massive impact on your mental health and your leader effectiveness. You can also try practices like meditation, affirmations, visualization, journaling. And hey, you might not have time for those things. Then maybe you can try something like this, gratitude. And that's something that you can do constantly in the moment, just the practice of gratitude. How about forgiveness? That one's tough. Just allowing yourself to let things go. What about taking some time to go and be in nature? I'll tell you what, these are some incredible ways that you can care for yourself. And hey, as a leader in your sphere, as a leader of influence, it's really important that you care for yourself so you have something to give. The second strategy number 2, is called self-regulation. Now, self-regulation or emotional regulation is really just the ability to regulate or adjust your emotions. We're not talking about strict emotional control. I'll tell you what, if you're a leader, often you're a leader because you're a passionate person. You're a person with emotion. You're a person with pathos or feeling. And so obviously, we're not trying to strictly control every emotion, but what we do want to do is channel them in a healthy way. When we channel our emotions, we can still express ourselves and vent our feelings, but not in a way that's unhealthy. Emotional regulation is so important because feelings drive behavior. So when we learn to regulate our emotions, they can serve and support us rather than the other way around. Now, when you think about emotional regulation, here's a couple of strategies that I have found have helped me. I think the first thing I've done is I've started to see my emotion as dashboard indicators. I'm sure we all drive cars and we can see the dashboard indicators that give us information about what's happening under the surface in the engine, in the different sort of, tubes that are running through your vehicle. I'm definitely not a technical person. And so as an emotion comes to the surface of your life, you want to notice it. You want to notice how you're feeling. You want to notice what people and events are contributing to either positive or negative emotions. And you want to take that as something of an indication. But secondly, using the metaphor of a vehicle, you want to keep your hands on that steering wheel. Your emotion is just a dashboard indicator, but you are ultimately the person who's in control. And I'll tell you what, right along with that, don't run out of coolant. Learn how to self-soothe. Learn how to let go of the things that you are hanging on to emotionally that you might need to let go of. As a leader myself, I found that so many times I'm hanging on to emotions that I need to just release and let go. And so the first sort of strategy for your own mental health is self-care, but the second is self-regulation. Strategy number 3 is safe relationships. Now, mental health and safe relationships, you know what? They go hand in hand. Human beings, they're social animals. They're hardwired to connect with others. Research across all kinds of disciplines consistently demonstrates that social support will enhance your productivity. It will enhance your psychological well-being and even your physical health. In fact, George Vaillant, Harvard professor of psychiatry who directed the world's longest continuous study of physical and mental health, when he was asked what he had learned from his 40 years of research, he said this: The only thing that really matters in life are your relationships to other people. Tell you what, hardwired into the deepest part of our instinct to survive is this primal realization that without deep connection, without belonging, we cannot survive or thrive. People who have social relationships that are satisfying, people who feel loved and cared for by others, they're more physically healthy and they live longer than people who feel socially isolated. And when you have that social connection, it will protect you against heart disease, against cancer. It will contribute to your immune system. It's not a cure-all, nothing is, but it will have a massive impact on not only your physical health, but also your mental health. And I'll tell you what, for you in your roles, so many of you, I'll tell you, loneliness is such a part of the picture. And that's tragic because who is safe? Who can you trust? Who can you open up to? I'll tell you what, it's so critical that we find safe places. It's so critical that we have social connections as much as we possibly can. Let me go ahead and give you strategy number 4. Strategy number 4 for building your own mental health and the mental health of your team is supportive connections. Okay, supportive connections. Now, I want to talk for a moment about spirituality because I believe that spirituality and mental health go hand in hand. Now, often when we think about spirituality, we think of religion or some sort of faith community. And of course, that is true. But spirituality is this broad concept with all kinds of perspectives. Spirituality includes a sense of connection to something bigger than us. To some degree, spirituality is that search for meaning in life. Spirituality is universal, and it touches every single one of us. Now, here's the thing. Mental health and spirituality are connected because healthy spirituality lifts us beyond the idea that this life and the present stuff that we're all facing, that is the complete picture. When all you see is what's in front of you, how many of you know that's tough, right? Resilience is hard because the pain of the present moment can be overwhelming. The stress that you're feeling, the situation that you're facing, it can literally take over. But what a spiritual mindset does is it helps to elevate your perspective so that you develop the capacity to endure setbacks and the struggles of this present moment because you see them as temporary obstacles. Now, part of this idea of supportive connections is also connecting with others who know how to help you with spiritual questions, spiritual concerns. There are legitimate spiritual guides out there who can support you in your journey. I'll tell you what, people like the incredible team at Leading Influence, along with other spiritual care providers, those are a great example. I'll tell you what, in my own spiritual journey, I've had the pleasure of connecting with teams like at, Leading Influence and other places, and they have been critical to sometimes help me put it all into perspective. Why is that? Well, because in the end, we all live and get by with a little help from our friends. And so as I conclude, I want to thank you for listening. Please hear me out. You're a leader and Canada needs you. Your province needs you. Your community needs you. Your family needs you. And your team needs you. And I'll tell you what, all of us, we need you at your best, mentally healthy and flourishing. And you can, as you apply these 4 simple strategies for supporting your own mental health as a leader and the mental health of your team. Strategy number 1 is self-care. Number 2, self-regulation. Number 3, safe relationships. And number 4, supportive connections. Thank you so much for listening today.